So I just got done watching season 3 of The Bear, so let's dive into it. So last night, The Bear season 3 aired all 10 episodes on Disney+. So I sat and watched all 10 episodes, so I want to talk about it. But before the show aired, I actually binge watched the first 2 seasons of the show in preparations for season 3. So if you want to check out that video, I'll post that somewhere over here. You can go check that out. And just before we go into the good, the bad, and everything in between, if you have seen the show, let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Bear in mind, this is going to be a spoiler-free review. So if you haven't seen the show, I won't spoil anything for you. But I would honestly highly recommend this show. While I've got a lot to discuss when it comes to the good and the bad, I do still think this show is a really solid watch. Going from season 1 to season 2 to season 3, just a consistent tone in terms of great storytelling. So I really would recommend checking out season 3. But we'll start off right off the bat with the good, because the show kind of starts off where episode 2 ends. Not the exact moment in time of when season 2 ends, because if you've seen the show with season 2, this is going to be spoilers, but season 2 left off with Carmen stuck in the walk-in freezer. So episode 1 wouldn't be like a traditional episode. Again, I'm not going to go too much into it. Right off the bat with the whole season in general and what they're going with, I really enjoyed some of the character storyline, especially Carmen's character development. I really love that unhinged moments that he gets in the show, especially for episode 2. Episode 2, hands down my favorite episode of the season, with just mostly dialogue heavy, because episode 1 isn't really too dialogue heavy. And if you've seen the episode, you'll know exactly what I mean. But with episode 2, very dialogue heavy, and I love the unhinged nature of the show, of the chemistry between the cast. But with Jeremy Allen White, he kills it in his performances with this show. With season 3, along with Ebon Moss, he does a fantastic job. That dynamic between the two of them, especially because of the tension of what happened in the previous season, I thought was so well balanced and so well handled, that watching their sequences and watching their scenes together just felt so unhinged and chaotic, which for me is what I described most of this season. Is so chaotic, but in such a great way. Also, one thing I really enjoyed about Jeremy Allen White's character was there's this moment, because like I said, they build him up in the show in season 3. There's a storyline, ongoing storyline of his, that he's very unhinged and certain things that he's doing towards the restaurant. But then you have this moment in the finale, because there are some flashback sequences you get in season 3, but then that builds up towards what they do in the finale, where he's confronting a certain character. And I really loved that performance. Like, Jeremy Allen's performance in that moment, in that scene, was absolutely amazing. Like, from his facial expressions to the dialogue to just like the back and forth he gets with that character, that honestly is just pure cinema right there. That sequence, that moment, that scene just felt like it was beautifully written, building up to what they were doing in the earlier show. I just think was so well handled. And honestly, when you're watching the finale, I would keep an eye out on that particular scene when he does confront a character. You'll know exactly who it is once you've seen the show, but it was so well handled. And huge props to Jeremy Allen White for how he handled that scene. And when it comes to like the other cast members, now granted, again, with this season, you don't really get a lot of screen time with the other cast members from the restaurant, but when you do get it, there's so many great moments. Like Marcus, for example, in the very early episodes, there's some amazing moments with him, and you get his storyline going on, especially with like the dessert section. You get the storyline with like the money situation with the uncle of the family, and just that whole situation going on, especially with what Carmen's ideology and what he's going for with the restaurant, and that balancing out with Natalie, Sugar, Carmen's sister, and then the uncle of the family. So there's a lot of like great dynamics and a lot of great chemistry with each cast members, where the dialogue is working so well, the scene is working really well, but overall just the storyline and the plot work for that is just working really well. Tina, another great standout. There was a whole episode dedicated to her, which I thought was so fantastic, and that episode was actually directed by Ayo Edebiri, her directorial debut, and I thought she did a fantastic job with that episode. Like, the directing was brilliant, and just the whole storyline and the whole plot. Although I do feel like the episode would have been better in earlier seasons, because it's sort of like a backstory of Tina. I do really enjoy that episode, and just where you'll get to see Tina in her life, and just build up to how she got hired at the Beef, which was the restaurant before what it is right now, like the restaurant that we first started in season 1. So I really do enjoy that. And you've also got like other cast members. Like, the facts were so entertaining in this show. Like in season 3, the way they were just bouncing off one another was absolutely hilarious. There was even like a moment in one episode where you get them having to like clean the floors, and then you get this amazing cameo, which I won't spoil it, but I did not see that coming. I could not see that cameo whatsoever. And if you've seen the show, you know exactly what I mean. But that was an amazing cameo, which honestly put a huge smile on my face, because the person that was in this episode, they worked so well with the facts and just bouncing off one another. Like this whole storyline about haunting people, which I just thought worked so brilliant. So these characters, now while they weren't the sole focus of the show, of the storyline, when they were on screen, they had such a great on-screen presence. They had so many great moments to shine and they really shone well. So I would say, when you're watching the show, keep an eye out on that cameo, but also just keep an eye out on the facts, because they were probably one of the best part of season 3 for me. And once again, like, you do get John Berthnell in there, obviously as a flashback sequence, but even again, once he is in there for like the limited screen time, he does a fantastic job. Like, I just love watching John Berthnell's character because of his personality in the show. Just works really well with what's going on with the storyline of the show, and he does a fantastic job with his performance. I could honestly watch his scenes all day. Like, I just feel like the episode that he was in felt like it ended too quickly. I wanted to see more of him. But what we do get with him, especially with Jamie Lee Curtis, like these cameos that you get in previous seasons, they do start appearing in this season as well. But again, it's not overshadowed with like their celebrity persona or anything like that. They work well with the storyline. John Berthnell worked really well in the storyline. That episode that he was in, Jamie Lee Curtis did a fantastic job, and I really loved that episode that she was in with her. And again, I'm not going to spoil exactly what the episode was about, but she did a fantastic job and was such an integral part of that story, which I think worked really well and was one of the better episodes of the season. Again, similar with like the finale, you had a lot of cameos because they were wrapping up a certain thing that happened in the show. And I just really enjoyed the cameos and the story that happened with that finale. And I do feel like some of the episodes were a lot stronger than other episodes, although there was no bad episode. I feel like each episode was on a consistent, really strong level. But for me, my standouts was definitely Ayo Edebiri's directorial debut episode. You got episode 2, which I said was dialogue heavy, but just was so unhinged. And then episode 8 is the one with Jamie Lee Curtis, which I think was a really, really strong episode. But even the finale too, like I said, it wraps up everything so nicely. But the show does end on sort of like a cliffhanger, because at the end it does say to be continued. So basically confirming that season 4 is going to be happening, which I'm all for. So you're ending on a cliffhanger, building up to what's going to take place in season 4. But I really loved how they sort of wrapped up certain storylines, but left other storylines hanging in the balance. Now, that is a good thing, but there's also sort of a negative aspect to that, which I'll definitely dive into. So I did enjoy what they did with season 3. Overall, a really solid show, a really solid season with so many strong moments, so many great stories, and so many strong episodes that if you haven't seen the previous seasons, I think you'll be left satisfied with watching season 1, 2, and 3. If you've seen the previous 2 seasons, I do think that you'll enjoy this one. Maybe not as strong as season 2. I still think season 2 is definitely the strongest out of all the seasons so far. But season 3 definitely builds on season 2 and is a great follow-up and also a setup to what they're going to have in season 4. And I do think that it's going to be an exciting time for season 4. So overall, again, I highly recommend this show. Highly recommend checking this out. Again, all 10 episodes are out, so you can either binge watch it or take your time. But it's definitely worth checking it out. But I do have some issues with season 3 especially. So we'll dive into the negatives here. Because when it comes to the show itself, it definitely feels like the pacing is a little bit all over the place. Like I said, episode 1 definitely is not really dialogue heavy and is a bit of a rocky roller coaster that you go through, and then it kind of picks up, but then it goes through different pacing issues with the season overall. And in terms of the tone of the storyline, there's definitely a lot of mixed bags. I mentioned it in the good. 3 episode is a really solid, strong episode, but certain episodes do slow the story down a little bit. And in terms of season 3, it has similar issues to season 1 in terms of there's not an ongoing plot that you're following. Like, for example, season 2, you're following the cast opening, renovating the restaurant, getting it ready to have it open to the public, whereas this season there's not an ongoing plot that you're following. There's a lot of different side plots that you're focusing in on, but it just feels like the plot itself kind of wanders aimlessly. There's not really one centric thing that you're going in there for. And I do feel like in terms of the characters, a lot of them were held back a little bit. Like, for example, Ayo Edebiri, while she does a fantastic job, you don't get that snarkiness, you don't get that sarcasm, you don't get that personality that you get in the first 2 seasons. It just feels like she was toned back a little bit. Similar with Ebon Moss and Jeremy Allen White, they were unhinged in the first couple of episodes, but then it just felt like their storyline kind of dwindled a little bit. You didn't get that chaotic sequences that you would get in the previous seasons. It just felt like a lot of their personalities were tamed back a little bit, and it just felt like a lot of characters were just put on the back burner. So they would get a couple of scenes here and there, like Marcus and Tina, for example, but then other characters that were in the show. Like Natalie, towards like the latter half of the show, felt like she was put on the back burner. Marcus, throughout portions of the season, felt like he was put on the back burner, and so it felt like a lot of these characters didn't have anything to do in the season because there was not an ongoing plot. And once again, you've got like other cast members that they show up here and there, but then they're not just integral to the story, which I think is such a shame because you have such a great cast that you could really utilize them well. But it felt like with this season, they didn't know what to do when it comes to like the story of the show. I actually forgot to mention this while I'm editing this, but also in terms of the chaotic sequences when it comes to like the restaurant moments of cooking, feels like that was also dialed back a bit. I wanted to see more of like the chaos in the restaurant, but we didn't get enough scenes with that. And there are some moments as well, because you are jumping around the timeline, especially when it focuses on Carmen's character, you do get lost at moments with the timeline because they don't really explain to you where certain scenes are taking place. You get a lot of like flashbacks, but you're just kind of confusing in terms of like what the story is going on with that episode or with that certain moment. So I do feel like it holds that back just a little bit, but still doesn't take away from how strong season 3 is, because like I said, I really enjoyed season 3 and what they did with it. It does, towards the end of the show, like in the finale, because it said to be continued, it does feel like, if you think about it, it feels like a setup season to what they're going to do for season 4, which you can look at it as a good thing or a bad thing, but I do feel like that might have set it up to be like a weaker season, but it depends on what they do and the payoff that they get in season 4. But as I mentioned, still a really strong season that I highly recommend. But if you've seen the show, please let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Did you enjoy it? Were you not a fan of it? Are you going to be looking forward to season 4? Let me know all of that in the comment section down below. And if you are new to the channel, do consider hitting that subscribe button as we do movie reviews, series reviews, amongst so many other different types of videos. So subscribe so you're not missing out on that. But thank you all so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. This is YK Reviews. Peace.